The metal door opened and light rushed in like a small sun. For 12 years, Daniel Brooks had seen only a square gray sky through a slit in the wall. He had counted steps on the floor, watched the same crack in the paint, and learned the sound of one guard's laugh. Then, on a cool morning, the guard's keys clinked, and a heavy door made a sound like a giant exhale. Daniel stepped out. For a breath, he felt the world with both eyes at once, and the light almost made him close them. Voices poured in from the hallway. The sound was sharp and strange. It was like being underwater and then suddenly hearing music. A nurse spoke in a quick voice. A tall man in a gray coat said, "Move him slowly." Daniel blinked. He tried to lift his hand, and it felt like his arm belonged to someone else. His chest was tight as a closed fist. He had been alone 23 hours a day for 12 years. The smell of the hallway, clean soap, a faint chemical, hit him in a way that was loud. A camera above clicked. A guard who had seen him grow old in a cell watched like someone seeing a ghost. "You ready?" the guard asked. Daniel looked at him and tried to smile. The guard nodded. "Okay, let's go." They put a thin blanket around Daniel's shoulders. Someone snapped a strap over his wrist. The strap felt odd because Daniel had not had a strap on his wrist in a long time. He took a step and the world tilted like a slow ride. He felt small and very big at the same time. He thought of the little light he had in his cell at night, and the way the walls had always seemed to get closer after a bad day. As they walked down the hall, other inmates watched. Some faces were blank. Some eyes held a quick look then turned away. Daniel felt 1,000 things push at him. Fear, hope, a kind of quiet anger that had no name. He wondered if his hands would shake. They did. Then the corridor buzzed and a loud alarm sounded in the distance. Doors slammed. People shouted. Steps came fast toward them. The guard tightened his grip on Daniel's wrist. Daniel felt his heart jump like a trapped bird. A man in a black uniform came running and shouted a short order. The guard let go of Daniel's wrist, and the man in black put his hand on him. "Sir, we need you to stay calm." Daniel heard the words, but they seemed far away. Someone shoved a paper into Daniel's hand. The paper had one line in big letters. Transfer. Daniel read it again. Transfer. He remembered what that word had done when he had first come to prison. How it meant a new place, a new set of rules, new walls. He had survived the cell. He had learned to breathe in small bites. But transfer meant another change. The man in black smiled a little and said, "This is to the unit. 2 steps and we stop. You okay?" Daniel didn't know. He felt as if the world were a room full of glass balls, and each step might let one fall. He wanted to ask what the alarm meant. He wanted to ask why a camera was following him, but their footsteps were quick and the lights were bright, and suddenly a roar came from the yard, loud, strange, like 100 radios turning on at once. It was a sound he had only heard in tapes before, a sound that meant trouble. The guard's face changed in a way Daniel could read. Without words. He closed his eyes for a second and breathed. That was the moment the story peaked. 12 years locked down, the door finally opening, and in the yard filling with a noise that pulled everyone into a new kind of fear. The world had opened, and then it slammed into danger. Daniel did not know where they would take him. He did not know what the day would end with. He only knew a sound that had been far away now felt like it was in his chest. The alarm grew louder. And then the scene froze like a picture, and the question hung in the air. What would happen to a man who had been alone for 12 years when the whole place around him suddenly lost its calm? We go back to the start to see how Daniel came here, and why the walls learned his name. Daniel was born in a small town in Kentucky. His mother worked long days as a nurse. His father left when Daniel was small, and sometimes the house felt empty. Daniel liked to draw trains and long roads. He learned to fix small radios with his hands. He liked the sound of static. In school, he stayed quiet and did his work. He had one good friend, Marcus, who liked to make jokes. They would skip rocks by the river and dream about driving to the ocean. Daniel never thought he would be the kind of man who makes the news. When Daniel was 21, something bad happened on a hot night. A man was hurt in a fight. Daniel had been there. He had been trying to stop things. When people are close to other people, hands can move and things can break. The man who was hurt later died. The police came. There were loud questions and bright lights, and a time when voices said things that made Daniel's stomach flip. The courtroom was another loud place. Daniel tried to speak, but the words fell heavy. They placed him on trial, and the judge said the law had to be careful and strong. People spoke of fault and luck. At trial, the jury listened for days. Daniel's palms sweated so much that the paper in his hands grew soft. The evidence had been a patchwork of small things. A witness said they saw Daniel at the place, though their memory had been cloudy. Another piece of paper had a name that connected to a man with a bad reputation. In the end, the jury said Daniel was guilty of a crime he had not meant to cause. The judge looked at him, and his face was dry like old paper. The sentence put Daniel in prison for a long time. Prison felt different from the outside. The first weeks were a storm of noise and rules. Daniel learned to keep his head down. He learned the routes to the mess hall and the laundry. He found a small square on his bunk where the sunlight came in at noon. He marked the days with a small stone. He tried to read books until the words stopped being friends and became only tools for passing time. After a year, Daniel got into a fight with a man who wanted his food. A guard watched and later wrote a report. An angry report and a bad name can make a man move to solitary. The place called solitary was tiny. The slot in the door let in only a little light. The blanket was thin. Once they put him there, they took away most of the things that made the world wide. He had a small mattress and a metal sink and a toilet. He had one small window slit and a light that turned on and off at fixed times. He had paper and pencil for a little while, and he drew a train with a single pencil until the lead wore down. Time in solitary is a slow thing that stacks itself like cups. At first, Daniel slept more. The hours spread. He talked to the bars in his mind. He talked to the crack in the wall. He made up songs and names. The guards came bring food once or twice a day. A doctor checked him sometimes. That was the life for many months. He counted the days by small marks on the wall. Each mark was a number. The marks grew into a pattern only he saw. Then the years came. One year folded into another. Friends wrote letters that stopped coming. His mother visited with a folded-up lunchbox one time and cried as she left. She said nothing that could make the walls less hard. She could not make a city of light appear in his cell. At first, the quiet had been a kind of peace. He wore it like a coat, but after many months, it changed. The quiet became a shape that pressed. His own thoughts grew loud. He forgot how to read the faces of others. He forgot the small things like how to tie his shoelaces. When a guard came, his hands trembled. The routine that had once helped him survive now made him a small clock that moved without a day. Daniel learned small tricks. He listened to the pipes at night and learned which ones would sing when the wind came. He kept a pebble by his pillow and rolled it between his fingers. He practiced breathing slowly until he could make his chest move like a metronome. He learned to imagine walking outside his mind and to make the images bright like colored windows. He practiced stories he would tell if anyone ever asked what it was like to be alone for 12 years. Some days the world felt far and close all at once. On a Friday in the 6th year, a guard slid a small envelope under the door. It held a newspaper clipping. The paper smelled like another place. The clipping had a small photo of Daniel in a lineup and a short paragraph about his case. He pressed the paper to his chest like it was the last piece of a map. In solitary, a small kindness can be bright enough to make a man cry. A guard who brought eggs and hummed a tune once stopped for a moment and looked at Daniel. "You hang in there, kid," he said. Daniel tried to smile. He wanted to tell the guard how grateful he was, but words were heavy. Every now and then, a visitor's name was called. Sometimes, a social worker checked his file and nodded. Once a lawyer came to talk about an appeal, but she had not much to offer. People outside the walls moved on with their lives. Daniel's world was a small square of gray and the sound of the door closing. The effects of solitary do not always show. Some nights Daniel dreamed of a room full of voices he could not follow. He would wake knowing someone had spoken, and he could not remember the words. His hands would feel strange like they belonged to another person. His head sometimes rang with a sound like a bell that would not stop. Sometimes he found he forgot the way the sun looked. He tried to remember a laugh. Other prisoners told him stories through the tiny hole in the door. They passed notes about the yard and about the weather. They told news about fights and about guards who left and guards who came. When Daniel learned that new men were arriving to the prison, he counted their names like new stones. Each stone was a story. Some stones sank into the mud. Some floated. As the years passed, Daniel thought about the man who had been hurt that night so long ago. He thought about how things could go wrong. Sometimes he whispered an apology to the air, a small word that made his breath catch. He tried to hold on to what was kind in him. He tried to keep a small place in his chest for the memory of the river and the friend who liked to joke. One day, after more than a decade in that small room, a new guard pushed a tray under his door and handed him a form. "Sign this," the guard said. "You've been granted a review." Daniel stared at the paper. A review meant someone looked again. His fingers moved like someone else's. He signed without thinking much. It felt like the first step of a long ladder. He slept with the paper under his pillow and rolled it like a secret. Weeks later came a slow change. A doctor talked to him. A man in a suit read a file. Questions were asked. Daniel answered in small words. The suit man said the right things, and the doctor said the right words. Then, after many steps, the warden told him there would be a transfer to a different unit. That is when the door finally opened. By then, the men in the cell block had a way of looking at Daniel. Some had known him long ago. Some had only heard the stories. The day he left, the pipe sang slightly different and the light had a different color. He was not sure he could make his hand obey. The chapter ends on an extreme event that would change everything again. As Daniel and the guards walked toward the new unit, the loud sound, like 1,000 radios, grew closer and closer. The yard erupted into a chorus of shouting. People were running. A heavy metal door slammed. A guard shouted orders. Doors that were usually peaceful turned to thunder. Daniel turned his face to the shouting and saw one prisoner sprint past, holding a bag and moving like a man with a plan. The guard stepped in front to stop him, and a struggle flashed. A shove, a hand on the fence, boots on concrete. The struggling man lost his balance and dropped the bag. The bag burst and diamonds and small metal boxes flashed against the wet ground like a broken star field. The jewels scattered and caught the light. For a moment, every head turned. That moment was loud and bright and sudden. It snapped the thin calm that had guided Daniel for years. The guards moved, the alarm screamed, and the people around Daniel's slow, careful steps became a storm of motion. He felt the world spin and the sound of 1,000 small things falling onto metal and concrete. The shout and the glitter and the running feet closed the chapter like a slammed book. Now the question sits in the air, heavy as the drain in an old sink. What will happen to Daniel, who has been alone for 12 years, when the whole prison breaks into chaos around him? We stop here. When you say continue, we will go on to chapter 2.